Hello. How's everyone doing? Thanks for joining. I have been working on a new video this week, so sorry if my mic sounds different or anything. I had to do lots of messing around to get that to work earlier on in the week, and switching between recording videos and streaming. Sometimes you have to set things up slightly differently, and it's the kind of thing that you need an engineer for. I don't know how to do it. Thanks for tuning in today. I want to say it's a Bullet Heaven stream rather. We've got two Bullet Heaven games, so Vampire Survivors type games. But one of the three games is a slightly different thing. It's kind of like a tower defense, wave defense type thing with stuff coming in from each direction. But they all felt like games in the same sort of design space. So I put them together. Just gonna put this on so we got the Relic Abyss music in the background. So what I'll do what I've been doing for the past few weeks on these Indies Under the Knife Thursday streams. I will go through the three games and give you some initial thoughts and impressions on them before we've even played them, and then we'll play them and give them each like half an hour of thought and feedback and stuff like that. As always, you know, this is going to be my subjective experience of playing these. There are genres of games that I like more than others. That's just the natural part of being any sort of critic. It's just kind of like being a fan that can articulate what they think in a particular way. So if there are any kind of common design problems that come up, we will talk about them, because that's what we do here. But yeah, just to kind of set your expectations a little bit, that's what we're going to be doing. And we've got Relic Abyss. Now, Relic Abyss has been in the queue for a while. I think this has been in the queue for nearly a year. And I didn't touch it because it looked really polished and I didn't think I'd have much to say about it. But it's going to be launched in the next 2 months or so. So kind of give it a quick look now and see what we think. Terzom in the chat said, do you like these types of games personally? I mean, I really like Vampire Survivors. I've played a couple of these types of games since that I like. But it does feel like a genre that got a lot of kind of fast follow imitators that weren't very good. I've done videos on that in the past. I will put links in the description for anyone who wants to go and find those. You know, I always go through the VOD afterwards and kind of add any links or timestamps so that you can skip to the game, skip to specific design discussions that we have, and skip to any other references I talk about, whether they're other people's videos or essays or stuff that I've done myself. I've done videos before on how to make those games or how to design them, not technically make them, because you know that's not what this channel is about. I like them. I think they can be good. I think they need to do certain things in order to be good. And I like the Bullet Heaven label because it helps you to understand what the pleasure the player is meant to be getting from these types of games is, which is like becoming the bullet hell, right? Like bullet hell is an old genre of shoot 'em ups where you're constantly dodging bullets. In a Bullet Heaven, it's the other way around. You're not dodging, you're not doing a very high stress thing of like trying to avoid death. You are farming resources and powering up your character so that you can generate loads of projectiles and kill loads of stuff. And the thing that I've tended to find people get wrong with Vampire Survivors clones is they hear the word survivor and they think that the game is meant to be about avoiding death. They think that the game is meant to be about surviving because it's called Vampire Survivors. But the first 10 minutes of a game of Vampire Survivors, the first 3/4 of a game of Vampire Survivors, the game is not really trying to kill you. It's just providing a context for you to farm resources and upgrade in. And people that try and make these games and don't really play them and don't really understand what's fun about them often don't understand that. So they end up making like a hardcore dodging based top-down shooter type game. And if you ask people to do that for 20 minutes with no break, like a kind of session of Vampire Survivors, it's very, very tiring. It's not It's not actually where the fun of those games is. I haven't played Ball X Pit yet. I would like to. It looks really cool. I mean, that's kind of like a pachinko based one, isn't it? But yeah, I think you know, the Survivors thing, I prefer the Bullet Heaven label because I think Bullet Heaven is a better summary of what the joy of these games is, which is becoming the danger. I am the danger. And that is, you know, the game is fundamentally about farming stuff, looking at the screen, scanning for resources, looking where the danger is coming from and moving away from it, or moving into the easy enemies if you want to farm them easy. And the way I described it before is when you're playing Vampire Survivors, what you're doing cognitively as a player, and this is one of the things that you have to do in order to think like a game designer, is to start to think about, you know, you design the controls of the game of like what the player can do to input into the game. And then at some point you have to start thinking about what's going on in the player's head that makes them push the button, right? So when they look at the screen and they see what's going on the screen, what are they actually interpreting? What are you asking them to think about when they look at what's on the screen? And in Vampire Survivors, you have a kind of, I sort of see it as almost like a heat map, right? The more you play Vampire Survivors, the more you can see which enemies are fast, which ones have a lot of health. They're very basic enemies, but you learn that the bats are fast, but they're like easy to kill. And these other things are slow, but they have lots of health, right? And that allows the player to look at the screen and kind of generate a little mental heat map of where the danger is on the screen. And then you have the resources they drop, which pile up on the floor, and that creates another heat map of reward. So you're, as a player, what you're doing when you play Vampire Survivors is kind of generating this mental model of here's where the risk is on the screen, here's where the reward is on the screen, and then when you get a bit more advanced, you're like going over there to pick up that special item and over there to pick up that special item. And the thing I found with games in that genre that don't work is that they fundamentally don't understand that. So one of the like obvious signs of like a noob doing one of these is they're not focusing on the resources that fall on the floor that you farm, right? Which is what Vampire Survivors ends up being all about. So if you make one of those games and, for example, you have a traditional XP system where the character just collects the XP automatically, then you're missing one of those heat maps and the game becomes a less interesting decision space for the player to like work out in their head as they're looking at the screen. And I think they're a really good genre for learning about that type of stuff because most action games are on some level about the player looking at the risk and reward. Like even if you have a simple Flappy Bird game where you're going along and you're trying to dodge danger, right? I think maybe a better example is Mario Run. You ever played the mobile game Mario Run? It's like an endless runner, and mostly you're just jumping over holes and stuff. But occasionally there will be a coin, and the coin will encourage you to do a slightly riskier action, right? And this is the core kind of like thing that you're usually trying to get players to do in most action games. It's like, do you do the safe thing, or do you do the riskier thing with the bigger reward? And in a Vampire Survivors game, you can like boil that formula down very easily by going, okay, we've got a bunch of different enemies. If the player learns what they look like, they'll learn what they behave like. And then they can kind of look at the screen and read where the risk is. And then they can also look at the screen and read where all the shiny reward is. And if you get those things right, then you've already kind of nailed like 80% of what makes these games good. These may be different because they're coming in that later wave. Let's do some kind of I mean the volume is in the yellow already, so I don't really want to increase anything right now. Turn it up slightly, but it's going to be different for everyone. So yeah, first impressions on these specific games. So I'm just need to make myself a note to remember to do something. So Relic Abyss looks like the kind of most obvious kind of we kind of see what's going on here, right? If we played one of these games, my gut reaction to this is that it feels a little bit like the camera's too close. Because like if you think about what I was talking about before, about giving the player a situation to read and thinking of those heat maps of like, where do I go to get the shiny? Where do I go to avoid enemies? All of that kind of stuff. Then the camera feels a little bit too close in these. And this happens quite a lot when people have really nice art assets. And I think this is a nice art style. It kind of reminds me of Kingdom Rush, the tower defense game. It's very cute. When people have very nice art assets, they often have a habit of making the camera too close. And then that inhibits the gameplay in some way. So in this case, what I'm expecting from this game is that it's going to feel a little bit less chilled out and casual than what I'm used to from Survivors games. We've got a lot of active abilities here. The camera is a little bit closer, and that puts the emphasis a lot more on like avoiding danger and dodging rather than like going around looking for resources. And I don't know if that's going to work for me. I want it to work. I'm looking at this and I think this looks cool. The art is nice. I'm not totally sold on these character designs. It's like a it's just kind of a taste thing. I feel like I'm not the audience for it. But it all looks really, really nice. And I like the kind of the just general style of it. The backgrounds are quite saturated, which might make the enemies hard to see. But yeah, the main thing is that it looks like it's going to be doing quite a lot of very manual use of abilities and stuff. And it also looks like the camera is very, very close. And I think those factors, like there's a timer up here saying 15:20. And the thing is, for me, if this is a game where we need to survive for 20 minutes or something like that, then I probably don't want to be spending 20 minutes like actively aiming this bow and triggering all these abilities and stuff like that. That's quite a lot of effort to concentrate on that for that amount of time. And I think if you think of like the original design of these games, that is the reason why the character is auto-firing and stuff like that. It's because you're asking people to do it for a reasonably long amount of time. You don't want to wear them out. So let's kind of see how that plays in a minute. And I'll just show you the other two before we get there. First impressions on all of them. The other one that's kind of more of a classic... Oh, I've just opened it and closed it again. The other one that is more of a kind of classic one of these games is called Astrolite. This is like a space-themed one. And... yeah, I mean, it looks kind of pretty standard. We've got some kind of arcadey visuals. We'll just see how this one works, really. It looks a little bit visually noisy. I think there's going to be a lot of feedback on that side of things, just like visual communication and how easy it is to like understand what you're looking at. Looks like we've got some active abilities here. Like, I'm not against active abilities in these games. I just think that a lot of developers have started bolting them on because they think it's a benefit to have more stuff. And I think sometimes it can detract from the kind of casual joy of just farming resources, picking an upgrade, farming resources, picking an upgrade. Because I'm kind of being a Vampire Survivors traditionalist here. The thing about Vampire Survivors is that you do pick your weapons, and then the thing that changes in the game is not, oh, I've got a new ability, I have to remember to trigger it, and I have to think about all of this stuff like I'm, managing a unit in a MOBA. It's more like, oh, I've got this weapon that fires a beam straight up and down, and that's going to change how I move around, right? So rather than adding new buttons and new things for the player to actively do, the attack pattern that emerges out of the bullet heaven of having your character spawn all these projectiles modifies the way that you just move the character around in the space and the way that you engage enemies, right? So if you've played Vampire Survivors, for example, you've got the garlic upgrade that just gives you like an area of effect damage on your character. And that changes the way you move your character around because you start to take riskier moves, moving into weaker enemies to like mow through them and stuff like that. And so often when I see these types of games with loads of active abilities in it, it kind of feels like maybe it's a gimmick and maybe it detracts from the core appeal of that genre of games. Maybe it's just that I haven't kind of followed on and carried on playing these games after Vampire Survivors because I kind of felt like I had my fill with that game. But that is my kind of gut reaction when I see a game calling itself a bullet heaven and then there's like loads of what seem to be active abilities. And both of these have that. And it's one of those things where I'm not sure it's really like an evolution that adds something. And we'll see what it's like to play. But I the kind of the universal game design thing here you can think about is how much attention are you requiring players to pay on your game, and like how long is a session and how psychologically tiring is that going to be. And if you're asking people to survive 20 minutes and the only interruption is like a level up thing saying pick one of these 3 things, and then you're also asking them to aim and stuff like that, that might be too much, right? So there's this kind of, you know, thinking of your player as a sort of organic machine with a limited amount of attention to spend on different things, and all of that side of things that we can think about here. And then the third game that we're looking at today, not really in the bullet heaven genre, but it is in the kind of defending from waves of things. We've got this very cute little lane defense game, Book and Horn, where you are a little witch and you've got stuff coming from either side, and you kind of like choose upgrades and make spells to attack the stuff on either side. Love the art style of this. It's incredibly cute. Quite excited to see how this plays. Seem to be able to play it in the browser. There's no advice to not play the browser version, so we'll play the browser version there. So yeah, let's check out Relic Abyss first, because it's been waiting for a year. Sorry, Dev. I know you submitted it a long time ago. I think when it was submitted, it just felt too polished and too far along, and I kind of didn't want to play it because at the time I was trying to focus on games where they were earlier in development. But let's check it out. We haven't done any games in this genre for a little while. Don't know if I want a story in one of these games. I don't know if I want it. Let's see how it merges. I've been thinking about this a lot as well. Like I've just removed a lot of story stuff from my own game, or like moved it where it is, because I think there are certain types of games where, you know, like I was talking with Gleb, the programmer on our game Dirt World yesterday, and we had this plan before where between runs there would be some story stuff, and I just realized that the game we're making is kind of like Spelunky, it's kind of like Neuter. Those games don't have story in that place. So where you put your story in your game, if you have a story, it's kind of like you can put it in an unusual place, right? Like Hades has story in a place that a run-based action game doesn't usually have story between runs, but that has a really appealing cast of hot characters doing a little soap opera, you know? So when I play one of these games, I don't really play it for the story. Vampire Survivors has that stuff that kind of appears later on in the game, and it's like a funny surprise when it shows up, but it's not a core part of the experience. Widrick, the Wandering Swordsman on a quest to become stronger, and Erin, the Archer. I'm going to play as the Archer because that's what I'm naturally drawn to, and if we end up playing like a whole session of this and it takes up the whole 20 minutes, 30 minutes, then I would rather play as the Archer. So yeah, when you're putting story in a game, how you tell your story is a set of features, right, that you've got to develop, and you want to make sure that you spend that time on something that the people who play those types of games is really going to appreciate. Is this the place? It isn't exactly how I imagined it, but oh well, the world needs me, so I'm here. Time to explore. We're Wasding. This place is a bit chilly. I'm glad there's a campfire here to keep us warm. Turn the game audio down a little bit. It is Lino. We love Lino. Okay. Are you the new no, this is Sean Bean, isn't it? Are you the new recruit? Yep, that's me. Came here straight from Faendrealm. A human in an elven land. My parents died when I was young and the elder took me in.
That's why I'm good at bows and arrows and stuff. But don't worry, I've completed my training in archery, so I should be competent enough to be here.
Right, well, let's see what you're made of. Okay, I guess starting today you're going to be one of the adventurers of the Abyss.
That's awesome. How about you start by exploring the outer layer? It's the starting ground for new adventurers like yourself. I'll do my best. Do you want me to come with you?
Let's have the tutorial just to be on the safe side. Yeah, see, I feel like everything that we've just experienced as dialogue, I'm not sure what it adds compared to just going Area 1, the training grounds, and it's on a map and you click on it and you start playing. I'm just not sure what we were meant to get out of that additionally. Would you like to descend into the abyss? I mean, I guess I don't have any choice. That's what we need to do. Okay, this is good. Like, story stuff aside, this is good because we can... what this does as a kind of demo of the game is it shows us what the scope of the game is from a player perspective, right? Not from like a project perspective, but as a player, I can look through this and go, okay, you know, here's all the stuff that makes this game big and long. And we care about that stuff. We're going to play it with the tutorial. Okay, so her arrows fire in the direction she's walking in. You can aim using your mouse. Okay, yeah, we're doing active aiming. So I click to change my aiming mode. The normal mode doesn't follow the mouse and just fires in the direction I'm moving in, and the other mode follows the mouse. So we've got kind of twin stick shooter controls, but we're not triggering when we fire, so it's sort of a middle ground. And I've got a dash on space. The art is really lovely. I'm a little bit... I still think we might have a few legibility problems. Just like everything is a little bit faded and kind of pastel. It looks really nice. They're just at an aesthetic level. It's just whether or not the things that need to stand out stand out. Okay, so we can banish a thing that we don't want to collect. We can re-roll, we can skip. Okay, so this is... There's nothing in the tutorial here that isn't like a genre standard thing so far, apart from the aiming. Moon ornament. Summon a barrage of moon arrows that shoot down from the sky in an area of effect. Right. Base damage, countdown, projectile interval 0.2. So is that going to be an automatic thing that triggers all the time? Yes. Okay, cool. So far my initial worries about this aren't true. Like, stuff is just triggering itself, which is good. That's kind of what I want in one of these games. It might not be what everyone wants. You might get some sickos that like the versions of these that have loads of actives, but for me, when you get into that space, you're not really making a bullet heaven anymore. You're making a kind of Diablo, you know, light Diablo, sorry. Path of Exile type game. Trance, Ghostgrieve, Swiftfoot. I want all the cool stuff. I'm not going to go for the passive stuff just yet. What's up with these owls? We're getting some of that arena variation where, you know, it puts walls around us and we have to break out of them. That's nice. So far, like, I'm pretty impressed with everything I'm seeing. Feels like they understood the assignment. I think when you enter a genre that already has a bunch of precedents of like how that genre is done well, you just want to kind of execute it really well at a base level, and I think this is doing that quite well. I do feel a little bit aimless on the basis that I would like a little bit more zoom and a little bit more visibility of the level, maybe, but it's a bit of a trade-off. Right, what have we got? What have we got here? Increase the scale of projectiles. That's fun. More attack speed. I do very much feel like this game is more, you know, died quite quickly then. I get the feeling that the game is focused a little bit more on trying to kill me rather than let me farm here. Maybe that's how they want it to be set up as a tutorial. I'll bring them back. Yeah, if the enemies could do some friendly fire, then you could deliberately kite enemies into their own attacks and stuff, which would feel like a nice bonus thing to be able to do. Okay. Don't want to talk to these guys, though. It's kind of reminding me of the experience I had with Marvel Midnight Suns, where it's just like putting a piece of story tutorial in for every single thing. This is why the characters can resurrect. This is why the characters travel from place to place. Should I talk to him? Okay, yeah. The problem with this stuff is some people will really like it and find it really charming. But as a player of one of these games, I just want to play the game as much as possible before I commit to caring about the other stuff around it. You know, I think whenever you're making a game in a genre where the story is not the main appeal, it's okay to have a story. But if you front load a lot of it, then you're potentially putting a lot of people off before they get to the point where they care about that side of things. It's much better to, if you're making a game in a genre that doesn't normally have a story, it's probably better to approach the narrative design from the perspective that the player probably doesn't care about your story, and they won't care about your story until they've played the game for like 20-30 minutes. And then if they like the game, you can start treating them like they care about the story. But it's not, you know, this isn't a visual novel. It's not a detective game where we're working out what happened in a place. It's not a game where the story is fundamental to enjoying and understanding how to play the game. So that's where I would think you'd backload it a little bit. But, you know, I might be wrong. There might be people that really love this mix of things, but so far it's like, yeah, make the players dig to find it, put the story in places in the game where it feels like a reward for people that really like the game, you know? So far it's like, I skipped a lot of the dialogue already because I'm just not really interested. But I think the other thing is, if you're going for this kind of style, like someone mentioned Thundercats a minute ago, and it is that kind of vibe. It's that kind of Saturday morning kids TV kind of vibe, which is a creative direction I generally quite like in games. One of my favorite, like, multiplayer, I don't know if it's really an indie game, but if you ever played Awesome Noughts, it was kind of like a MOBA lane defense game with these kind of Bucky O'Hare, Sheriff Bravestar style characters. It had a really funny, like, 80s hair metal theme music and stuff. You know, I love that direction, But I think if you're going to have character dialogue and stuff in this setting, you need to go really far in that direction and not just have them go, I'm the hero that shoots arrows. I'm here from this place to help with the... It's like, no, go full Sonic on it. Tell me about the food that this character is obsessed with and why they collect chili dogs or whatever. Otherwise, you're kind of doing this middle ground between serious fantasy and this more kind of goofy kids anime thing. You know, if you're going to have characters and characterize them and have them chatting to each other, you've got to have that stuff. And to be fair, that stuff might be in there and we skipped it, but so far a lot of the dialogue has felt a little bit perfunctory and like it would have just been fine to go, when you die you get resurrected, and have the little character there that does it but not necessarily need to talk to them, you know? We've got a fireball. Let's get the passive movement speed this time, because that probably would have helped me not die the first time. I like from what I've seen so far in this little taster, I like the design of the waves and the fact that we've got all of this battlefield variation. That's cool. You know, we've got this wall that shows up. It just changes what you have to respond to in a nice way. You've got the kind of waves that fly by. I thought I did get the epic Crimson Chalice. That's the thing that gave us the fireballs. Yeah, it's down there. We got it. It's the fireball thing. The Crimson Chalice is the fireballs, and then we've got these. So I think the way it works is you have your base abilities that you get to level up based on the character you picked, and then these are things that anyone can have, the kind of neutral spells. Increase your damage base to 51.5 of your move speed. Okay, that's fun. So we're starting to get some like very crunchy MOBA-esque stat interlocking type stuff. So now I can, the more I level up my character's move speed, the more damage boost they'll get from that. That's neat. I like that. And I can see how that can make, you know, that can take a bunch of very numerical stat space upgrades and make them feel characterful. You know, if we say, oh, the archer is the kind of fast glass cannon type character, and then we give them an upgrade that links their damage to their move speed, that's going to make them feel different to play from someone else. Yeah, the attacks do feel very slow. I mean, this is part of why I'm worried about the camera being too close as well, is that it makes the game feel maybe a little bit harder than it should do. And it makes me think, even when I'm very leveled up, there's not like much of a screen to fill up with projectiles. You know, when we do get into full bullet heaven, what is this? A monolith. Touch the monolith. I love touching a monolith. Ah, okay, that's what they do. So we've got, I mean, it would be helpful if I killed anything while that experience boost is active. Like the little charging piggies. Peppa Pig. The grimdark reboot of Peppa Pig. The Peppa Pig Darkest Dungeon mashup that we've all been waiting for. Fun fact, fun Peppa Pig fact, and retro games fact. the guy that voices Daddy Pig in Peppa Pig is called Richard Ridings, and he's also the guy that did the announcer voice in the classic Bullfrog game Dungeon Keeper. I don't... Altacia said, I don't think you've talked about managing expectations in game design, though you've made way more videos than I can keep up with. Yeah. I mean, a lot of that comes back to something that I go on and on and on about, which is make the type of games you play. And if you don't... one of the main problems that a lot of indie developers have is that they are gamers and they are developers and they want to develop games and they think that anything that they develop is automatically an indie developer an indie game because they developed it independently, and technically it is. But the problem you get is when you get developers who are gamers who don't play any indie games, and then they just kind of look at the indie space and they go, oh yeah, I'll make a Bullet Heaven because they seem easy, or make an incremental because they seem easy. And they're not actually working in a design space that they understand. And they're not working with a form of fun that they understand. And that's a good way to not make anything good. Because you're like always having to second guess or like actively research, you know, you're having to like force yourself to go and play a bunch of these games in order to understand what the appeal of them is. And that can work because you can gradually become a fan, but you sort of have to be a fan of the sort of thing that you want to make. Because it just gives you, it gives you shortcuts, you know? Yeah, we occasionally have to play games we don't play to like research how they do something or whatever, but it's way easier to make indie games if you just pick a style of game that you actually like and play all of them and then contribute to that genre in a kind of natural, organic way, you know? Right, so just to give this a fair crack of a fair shot, let's go back to the main menu and try the other guy quickly. I like this, but one of the things I'm feeling is it does... The presentation's nice. There's a lot of, like, it feels like it's... It feels like it's leaning more towards the kind of survival game side than the satisfying farming bullet heaven side. And that's a little bit frustrating. Like, I'm not getting to a point where the game feels satisfying because we're not like getting loads of projectiles. And one of the things I usually tell people when they're asking about balancing in games where you're dealing out damage, if you've got a game where you're dealing out damage to enemies and you've got a bunch of levels that you can level up, right? The first couple of levels should feel very significant because that's how you hook people into wanting to level up more, right? So if you think of these basic enemies, the kind of main enemies that we're fighting, the little guys, they should be your like player's touchstone for feeling their first 5 minutes of upgrades. And that is how you onboard people into the satisfaction of upgrading. And to give you a more concrete example, what people tend to do when they build an upgrade path is they make a curve or they make a linear thing, and they're thinking about it like mathematically over the course of the whole game. Or like if someone plays this game for 30 minutes, this is how the number will increase. But you need to think about it experientially for the player. And what that means is that often you want a curve where the start of the curve is more impactful than the end of the curve, right? If you've played FromSoft games, you played Elden Ring or something like that, they have these kind of soft limits where if you level a skill up to a certain amount, it stops being as helpful, the increasing it. And that's a similar thing where like the upgrades that you get towards the end are less powerful. It's because you want to feel the improvement more at the start. And the way that I would translate that into how a game like this should feel is if I've got my standard attack and there's a little guy that's like the standard enemy, it's a little zombie or a goblin or whatever your basic enemy is, I start the game and I attack it, and I have to attack it 3 times in order to kill it. And then when I level up, I have to attack it 2 times. And then when I level up again, or maybe when I do my 4th level up, I only have to attack it 1 time, right? That's a very clear thing. And I think it's very easy to get like lost in numbers and thinking, oh, this damage goes up 5 per level or whatever. And what you actually need to be thinking about is mapping the numbers onto how it feels to play as a player, right? So if you come up with a, you would call it a user journey story where you write a little paragraph that is like, at level 1, this is what the player should experience. At level 2, this is what the player should experience. At level 5, this is what the player should experience. And you model that around like how many hits it takes to defeat an enemy. Then you're focusing on what is satisfying for the player rather than just like the base level, oh, I need to put some numbers in here for the upgrades to go up, right? Which is not how you onboard people into the fun of the game. So one of the things I felt in those runs with the Archer was that I just wasn't leveling up quick enough, and it didn't feel like the upgrades I got were making it easier to kind of clear the screen of the basic guys. And that's the thing you really need to get right at the start of one of these games to make people want to play more of it. Because I'm picking upgrades and it's like, cool, I like picking these upgrades. These look neat. I like this. And then I pick a few and I don't really feel like the game is getting any easier or like I'm farming resources any more quickly. And that's the thing to me that makes Bullet Heavens work, is that kind of, it's almost like a form of incremental game. It's about farming the resources and getting faster at farming the resources. So we need to feel like we're getting faster at destroying enemies, and we need to feel that improvement quite quick. Okay, I'm playing this guy with the controller now. I was playing with the mouse and keyboard before, but it feels more natural to play the melee character with the controller. I missed the question in the chat about genre, but I think Maui's response is exactly right. You know, if you have a big genre of game, there's a type of game you want to work on, and it's like not really a small scale indie project in scope, then what you should be doing is working out how you make the minimalist version of that game. And what people often do when they try, and this is why I say you need to play indie games and not just AAA games, is that what people often do is they go, okay, well, I can't make that big game, so what I'll do is I'll make it, but I just will only make 3 levels. And the problem with that is that the people who would play that would just play the original game. You know, if you go, I'm going to make a smaller version of Hitman, so I'll just make a really complex game, but I will make it really short and I'll just make 1 level. People aren't going to play that because the people who would play that would play Hitman. So what you need to do instead is like boil the experience down into a simpler game that you can still make 10 levels for, so people feel like they get their money's worth, right? So the example I would use is if you want to make Hitman, you go and look at the mobile game Hitman Go, which is like a minimalist version of Hitman that's like a little board game, but it's still, you know, when you're playing it, you're still going through a similar thought process of, I'm going to sneak up on this guy and then I'm going to pick up that rock and throw it over there and da-da-da-da, right? It's kind of like, you know, John Wick Hex would be a good example. Those aren't indie games, but they're still like smaller, much smaller scope. And we have the same thing with strategy games. You know, there are loads of good examples of what a smaller scope strategy game looks like. I'm currently in the process of replaying Bad North. That's a really good model for like how to make a mini RTS with some of the stuff taken out. And, you know, some of it comes down to why you're doing what you're doing. And if you're just doing stuff as a hobby, you can make whatever you want. You know, no one's stopping you from making your massive RPG or trying to make an MMO or whatever if you're doing it as a hobby. But if you're kind of serious about doing it as a profession, then you need to make stuff that people are actually going to like because you've made it good. And that means not trying to make things that you don't have the skill set to make. And this isn't just a thing in games. This is kind of a thing across all media. You know, you see people that you see it in music as well. You see people that get really impressed by someone like Tame Impala making, playing every instrument. So they make their own records and they try and do that. And maybe their songwriting's quite good, but they end up with loads of like bad stuff in it because they've got obsessed with the idea of, you know, doing this thing all by themselves with all of these parts and all of that kind of thing. It's not a unique problem to games. It happens across all creative media. If you want to make something good, it's usually better to focus it more on stuff that you know you can execute. Yeah, executing a subset of a larger genre, right? And that's like the danger with the game that we're playing now, like that thing of, oh, I'm going to take this type of game that doesn't normally have a story and I'm going to add a story in. It's like, okay, that's, yeah, you know, I've been down on the story in this game so far. I'm sure there will be some people that like it. For me, it's like, I don't even want to engage with it because I don't see the point of it being there. And that's an example of something where, you know, you're adding another skill requirement to the project for yourself as a developer or as a team, and if you can't execute on that thing, you've made the game worse by adding something. And that's like, that's a big risk, you know, adding something that you don't really need to add because you can see that games of that type don't need that thing. And then, you know, unless you've got a really good pedigree of writing things that people like, you've got no evidence that that is the thing that you really need to do to make that game better, right? There's a thing in... So folks that don't listen to it yet, I've been doing a podcast for the last year with my friend Tom, who's a game developer who's local to me, where we read books about game development, game design, things that might be relevant to game developers. And a little while ago, we read a book called Up, Down, Up, which was about, you know, starting a game studio effectively and what makes some game studios successful over time and what makes others not. And it's based on all of these different interviews with different like CEOs and technical leads and design leads from lots of different studios, some of them indie, some of them big ones like Blizzard and King and stuff like that. And one of the concepts that they put across in that book is the idea of the proven and the promise, right? So you have to kind of prove what you can do. And that's what you do when you're learning. You're not just learning the skills, you're like learning which of your skills are the strongest, whether that's as a solo person working on your own or with a team. You're working out what you're strong at and what you're weak at. And then in order to like make things that build up some hype and other people get interested in, right? And this applies both to like marketing your game or getting your early playtesters, but it also applies to like getting collaborators, like getting other people to get on board with your project and work with you. It's all about the relationship between what you've already proven and what you're promising to do, right? So, you know, if you met someone in your town who was a book author and they said, "Hey, I want to make a video game with you. I'm an author that sold hundreds of thousands of books," you would go, "Oh, cool, I want to work with you." But then if they said that the game they wanted to make wasn't a narrative game, you'd be like, well, that's not what you're good at, you know? Whereas if they came to you and said, you know, I want to make a visual novel with the characters from my book. Can you help me build that? Can you program that with me? You'd be like, yeah, because that's a skill set that you've proven. You've proven that you can write, you know? Just like if you're coming into game development from another set of skills, like you're an animator, and the type of game you want to make is very animation heavy, it's like a beat 'em up or something like that, it's all about characters moving around, then the game you're promising to make matches up with the things that you've proven you can do more, right? And this is why studios tend to, you get the odd studio that every game they make is different, like Strange Scaffold make loads of very different games. Clay, who made Mark of the Ninja, Invisible Ink, Don't Starve, make lots of different types of games. But most studios have something at their core that they do well over and over again, you know? Inkle make very interesting systematic narrative games. They have their own proprietary technology. They make the same sort of thing over and over again. Arcane, who made Dishonored, Deathloop, and Prey, they make similar sorts of imsims. They reuse abilities and stuff like that. And when you see that, it's very easy to go, you know, Naughty Dog, The Last of Us isn't the same as Uncharted, but he uses a lot of the same technology and skills, right? And it's very easy to look at that and think, oh, that's just a technical thing because they want to reuse their libraries. They want to but it's also about the skills in that team. It's about what the artists can do. It's about the types of programming that the programmers can do. Because one of the things that no one really tells you when you first get into games programming is that all of the parts of the game are different disciplines. You know, there are people that are very good at doing game feel based programming for action games, like programmatic animation. And there are people that are very good at data architecture and building menus and building systems. And the more projects you work on, if you're trying to make games entirely on your own, which I don't think should really be the goal, but I know it's what lots of people are doing, then you're going to find that you gravitate more towards one of those types of programming, and going with the grain of like your own skills and your own personal history of what you've practiced more will be a process of going, well, you know, like, I'm actually quite good at this, and I'm not so good at building these types of systems. So the game I should make is over in this design space where I get to do more of the things I'm good at and less or fewer of the things that I'm not so good at. And there's obviously a counter argument that you need to practice the things that you're not good at, right? But there's a pivot point where if you're moving from being a hobbyist and learning how to do the thing to getting to that point where you're like, I really want to release a game, I really want to make a game that's commercially viable and put it out there and other people care about it, then you almost need to see it as you're kind of switching to a service mentality. You're doing this for an audience, you're making a thing for someone else to consume. And, you know, imagine that you're having people round to your house and you're going to make them a meal and you want those people to be happy and you want to impress them. You make something that you know how to make, right? Unless you're a very skilled cook and you cook different new things all the time and you're very good at like cooking a new thing well the first time, what most people are going to do is pick one of their standard meals that they're very good at cooking and cook it to a high standard because they care about those guests, right? Whereas when you're just cooking for yourself, you can do whatever, you can slap whatever together, you can experiment with some new stuff, right? So there's that kind of balance of how much do you experiment? How much are you trying to like learn a new skill versus how much are you trying to apply skills that you know you already have? And that kind of way of thinking should kick in much more heavily when you're trying to make things for market. I know for some people there's no distinction because as soon as you start making your first game, you're thinking about selling it. That's not really the kind of direction that this channel comes from generally. I think it's kind of like just wrong-minded generally, you know. There's everyone's always going on about how many games are being released. It's largely because 70% of what is being released is people putting their hobby learning projects on Steam. Again, not unique to games. Every medium is like this. The difference is it's very hard to find all the slot music on Spotify because the algorithm doesn't show it to you at all. But it's the same everywhere. And in some ways, it's the result of something good, which is like it becoming easier to make things, which is generally a good thing. But if you want to make things that are good, then this is the way you need to think, you know? Okay. I think I said everything I want to say about Relic Abyss. It's doing lots of things well. I like what I see. It feels a little bit too tuned towards the game wants to kill you versus the game wants to provide a satisfying experience of... The way I talked about it before with the Vampire Survivors video is it's like a satisfying popping bubble wrap type activity. Doesn't kind of feel like this. It's a little bit too stressful. Although with the melee character, I was having that ramble all the way through and only partially concentrating on the game. And I was still able to play it, which is kind of, that's a good indicator that a game is sort of in a more casual space. Like can someone play it while they're thinking about or doing something else? And it seemed like with the melee character, I had a little bit of an easier time of that. With the kind of archer, it was much more... maybe this is a deliberate part of the design, that the the developer has thought through quite a lot, that they, you know, they set the archer character up to be the more active character that you have to think a little bit more, whereas the melee character you could, or maybe I was just having a better time because I was playing with the controller. I don't know, but it felt like much more of a kind of casual experience with the second character. But yeah, it never, that game is not really hitting that point where I'm popping bubble wrap, which is, to me, is the psychological gratification that you get from a bullet heaven game. And you need to show people that there's that in the game quite early on. You need to show people the seed of that. And that's kind of what I was talking about with the kind of inverse curve of damage. You know, when you're designing damage for any kind of statistically driven game, whether it's one of these or like more of a Diablo type action RPG, the thing that the player can feel is how many hits does it take to down an enemy. And that's the thing they're really upgrading. It's not 5% to this, 10% to this. You have that system in place, but the system is in place to produce the player experience of, a minute ago, it took me 3 hits to kill a goblin. I've leveled up a couple of times, and now it takes me 1 hit to kill a goblin. That's the kind of thing. The design of the numbers should feed into that. And that's one of the things that you can use regardless of what game you're working on. If you have a numerically driven system in your game for balancing, before you get too weighed down in what the specific numbers are, you should think about what player experience you're trying to produce with that model. And like, particularly when it comes to onboarding people into the game. And when I talk about onboarding, I'm not necessarily talking about a tutorial, although it can include a tutorial. I'm talking about like getting them into it, right? When you talk about getting into an activity, like showing them what's fun about it, that means that you need to have the first couple of upgrades in your game. Maybe they're not even on the line, you know, maybe the line is like this, but I'm sorry, I'm not even gesturing towards the camera. Maybe the line is generally a straight line, but the start of the line is like a cliff like that. So that if you pick the first couple of upgrades in one part of the tree, you immediately feel the difference. And that's like, this is like multiple layers, because like the kind of this is kind of a couple of stages of game design, because you've got like the implementation where you go, okay, in order to balance my game, I need all this data and I need to feed it in from a spreadsheet, and I need a CSV set up so I can change the data in the game when the game needs rebalancing. But then there's this kind of player experience thinking side of things, which is much more, you know, how much do I need to make that upgrade at the start of the game so the player can feel the difference immediately, so that they have a fun time, so that they want to play the game more. And this genre is like, it's all about building a kind of satisfying, like I say, kind of like popping bubble wrap. Astrolite is the next one. Let's see if this has got the bubble wrap feel. That's the main thing I'm looking for with one of these games. I didn't feel a big difference in the speed between classes, but I think it is there as statistics. Didn't feel like it started off very different. But they've got different upgrade paths as well, so unless you played the game a lot, you wouldn't necessarily feel that. Worst controls, aiming with the mouse, default ability F, turbo shift. Okay. Get the audio up a bit. Art direction's a little bit noisy. We've got this kind of bendy CRT thing that's trying to look like an arcade machine, I guess. I like these kind of grainy, downsampled planets. One thing I would say about this is just there's too many colors in general. You know, I can see that these colors are kind of categories, but there's such a sort of like rainbow range of every color. that it makes it hard to work out why things are in different colors. You know, we've got green over here, we've got red here. I can see maybe those are categories of things and that's why they're in different colors. We've got like green and red. It just feels like there's not a very clear information hierarchy in terms of how the colors are used. Okay, use WAS to move around. And I get that it's kind of going for that visually noisy retro style, but it might be that we want to reserve that for like the stuff in the game that is supposed to be exciting rather than just the basic information, you know? Okay, so I'm flying around. I've got a turbo. I've got these green projectiles that fly out of me automatically. But I'm choosing the direction they go in. Again, I think like stuff like directional aiming and everything in these games should really be like an advanced feature. You know, you start off with stuff that just goes out in a set direction, and then later on you get stuff that kind of comes out of a trail behind you so that you have to think a little bit more, but not too much. Make it all optional, make it all like late game stuff. Spray. These are all spray. Okay, so this is the attack. The spray is the attack we've already got. And this is the kind of stuff that it does. So this is speeds up the attack. This does attack speed and bullet size. This does damage and attack speed. This does damage and crit chance. It feels like too much to think about in one of these choices. Press F to activate your ability. Death Blossom. That's a nice name. That's really cool. That's really cool. So it spins me round, shoots the projectiles out everywhere. I don't know if it shoots whatever projectiles I've got because I've only got one projectile so far. That felt like a nice use of it being a spaceship as well. So it sort of like justifies the theme a little bit. We're getting armor upgrades. Those don't feel exciting to me at this stage because I want upgrades that deal damage. I don't want stuff that is like, you know, preventing me getting punished for crashing into things. Are we ever going to get another projectile? See, this is kind of the similar thing to what I was talking about before. It's like, okay, before the point I was making was about numbers and like, oh, here we go. Increase the amount of enemies that spin. No, pickup radius. Let's go for that. Before it was about numbers of like how quickly can I kill a basic enemy in this game. But this, here we go. Now we get to choose a new projectile. This is kind of, you want to get to this quite quick because the point at which your character upgrades to a point where they have a second projectile is the thing that makes the difference between runs, right? So if it takes a few minutes for me to pick my second projectile, then it means the first few minutes of the game are always identical because I start off with the same thing. And I have to go through that process. It's like almost like having to play the tutorial of a game every time you start it. So if you think of like, this applies to other genres of games. If you think of a deck builder, Slay the Spire, I play the first combat, it probably only takes me about 30 seconds if I've experienced and I understand the game and I understand the character I'm playing. I immediately get to choose something that changes my deck. The way that this is structured is we go through a few layers of upgrade that are very wordy. It's like this one does this many percentage to this and this many percentage to this. There's 4 of them, which means we've got even more to read and think about. And again, this might be one of those things where the developer is thinking, well, if I do 4 instead of 3, that's more generous, so players are going to like it. But it slows down the player experience of picking, particularly when it's all kind of numerical and there's lots of different percentages and stuff. So like having 4 instead of 3 might not be the generous, you know, being nice to the player choice that you think it is, because what the player really wants in this situation, and I'm saying the player talking about myself, but I'm thinking generally about why people play these games as well, is I want to get to this point as quickly as possible where I get to choose my second weapon, because that's the thing that makes the different playthroughs feel different. So we've got like a trailing laser now. And I can point it with my little laser beam. And what's over here? There's like another invader. Time for some fun. Yeah, the reason why, like, at least for me, I like that kind of pick one, discard two mechanic. And part of it is that if you have like quite a generous set of pool of things for the player to pick from, it becomes less about just like, oh, what are you picking to have right now? And it's also like you're choosing what to not have, right? Because it's a choice between three things. Whereas if it was like on a skill tree or something, when I see skill trees, I just think, oh, I'm going to get all of this stuff eventually. It's just a, which order do I get it in? Whereas with those pick three mechanics, it's almost like you're choosing what to discard as well. And it feels here, because the upgrades are a little bit incremental and they're all stat based, you know, it's not as interesting a decision as having three things that are very different from each other and you're discarding two and picking one. Pluto conquered. I love to conquer Pluto. Okay, we've done the tutorial. We can start the conquest. Yeah, I'm already having more fun with this. I mean, an interesting thing here, like a parallel with Vampire Survivors that the previous game didn't have, because what the previous game was trying to do was like, okay, we have all the basics of Vampire Survivors and we're going to make the kind of fidelity of the world by adding story and adding more animations and stuff like that. We're going to make that aspect of the game higher and more appealing. But the problem is when you try and go like higher fidelity in a certain direction and it ends up detracting from something that made the original thing appealing. One of the things I like here is that because we have these very, very simple enemy designs that don't have any animations and they're quite sort of like Space Invader-y, it means that as a player, I'm already looking at these and sort of understanding how they work. And that's, again, that's part of the way that Vampire Survivors works, is that there's a massive library of enemies and they're not like complex. They're just like, there's some things that are big and slow and have lots of health and some things that are fast and don't have much health, and that's kind of it. Occasionally things have attacks. But because they're so simple, there can be lots of them. And then there's kind of like quite a lot of visual information for the player to read and understand, because over time they learn that bats do this and zombies do this and so on. And this feels like it has that quality a little bit more immediately. We got, you know, these guys with spikes on the spin. I feel like we've just seen more variety of enemies sooner. It feels like this game is more generous with the enemies. What I've seen about the way that the upgrades work feels a little bit stingy. You know, like you don't get a new weapon very often, and then you get these kind of incremental upgrades to the... I need to pick up the shinies more. You get these incremental upgrades to the weapon you've already got. Okay, so, but maybe that was just a tutorial, because here we're being offered a scatter. Although we've already got it. We've got scatter and spray. Put the attack speed of the scatter up. We can make the player smaller. We can make the player faster. Let's have critical chance, especially with that rapid fire spray weapon. That seems like a good combination of things. It's not super clear when some of these things are projectiles and enemies. I think that's why we often have like, you know, red projectiles in games, but then the character that shot it wasn't red, so that we can differentiate. I think making these triangles is not a great idea, because the enemies they come out of are triangles and it just is a little bit confusing. This is pretty cool. I love having an increased pickup radius. I will always go for that. Yeah, or make the enemy projectiles into balls so they look like more traditional kind of bullet hell projectiles. You know, when it's... Also, you've got green projectiles for the player and red for the enemy, which is going to be not colorblind friendly. Because they will look the same. Yeah, so dev of this game, if you're looking at this stream or you're watching it back, do have a look at the comments that are coming up from the folks watching, because in some ways, you know, they're not playing the game, so the visual communication of the game is almost more sensitive for them. So like the fact, you know, someone just pointed out that the projectiles look too much like your own ship. And generally, I don't like bullet hell games, but this feels kind of not too difficult. We've got quite a lot of health, which is kind of making up for it. It's not like, oh, you touch something once and you die. So even though we're doing a kind of classic bullet heaven boss here that we wouldn't normally get in a classic bullet hell boss, sorry, that we wouldn't normally get in a bullet heaven game, they've given us loads and loads of health, and presumably we can invest some of our upgrades in health as well. So it feels like it fits pretty well. There we go. Because these kind of engine building games that are about stacking loads and loads of upgrades, they're not usually about, oh, you get touched once and you die. You know, it's about gradually losing your health, your chip health over time from making a series of bad decisions or whatever. Go to that planet. Yeah, so I think the key things to the core feel of this game, it's satisfying. It's got the bubble wrap thing. Picking up those crystals feels great. The way that they move feels really nice. The way that they kind of hover towards you is really great. I think the most cause for concern thing in the game currently is the projectiles being visually confusing. I would try and reserve red for enemy projectiles as much as you can, and then have a different color for the main enemies. I also think there's just generally too much red in this game. Like, you've got it down here. Why? Like, if you were to just look at every element on the screen, and you should do this. Like, this is kind of a like fundamental graphic design thing. But in a game like this, where everything is quite colorful and abstract, it's even more important. Look at every single thing on the screen and think about, why is it that color, right? Why are these yellow and these red? I'm not sure. It's not very clear to me why. So it's not the level, because these are both level 1 and this is red and this is yellow. Is it because it's power and crit? Those are just mapped to red. It's not very clear why that's red, right? So red is losing its usual power. Red is something that brings things to the top of the information hierarchy. There are lots of different explanations for that. One is the kind of semiotics thing that it is red is danger, that kind of thing. Another is more to do with the way that the cones in our eyes work. But generally, you want to use red sparingly, and you want to have a very clear sense of why you are using red to draw someone's attention, right? And the problem is we've got red around the outside. We've got red on show more stats, which is not an important thing most of the time. It's not something you need to draw someone's attention to. So yeah, I would think about that kind of stuff. And I would go back to some, like, I feel like the visual design works fine. You've got like spinning pixel art where the pixels get rotated and stuff, and some people won't like that, but that doesn't prevent me from enjoying the game. I think the confusion between enemies and their projectiles is a little bit game breaking, and yeah, there's just too much red. I think the kind of general approach to the colors across the game is confusing. Like, if we're picking up blue crystals to get XP, make the bar up here the same color as them, so there's a very clear relationship between those things. Yeah, red is attack and yellow is utility. That makes sense. But I think when you put text in red like that, it makes it look like a kind of danger highlight. But you must pay attention to this thing. Whereas if you're making it a category of things, I would make the background of that upgrade, that color, almost like it's like, you know, white text on a red card. Because as soon as you put the text in red, it kind of starts to read like it's a warning. But to me, this feels like it captures what I want from this genre of game way more than the previous game, which was... The last game was so visually polished, and I hope it finds an audience. I hope Relic Abyss gets a bunch of people that like it and love it. But the time that was spent on making the art assets for that game and adding the story to it, it feels like it was almost, you know, for me, damaging to the expectations of like what someone wants to get from one of those types of games, which is the bubble wrap satisfaction of popping things, collecting the stuff that comes out of them, you know, feeling yourself grow in power as you get more projectiles, and it becomes kind of easier to just nuke big parts of the enemies on the screen. This does feel like it takes a little while to get new attacks. And I think the pick 4 over pick 3, I'm not sure what that adds. It just kind of slows down the decision making a little bit. But the thing I would do if this was my game, I would change the projectiles to be balls rather than copies of the original ship, because that's just confusing. I think when you have enemy projectiles coming at you, you need to make them look generally more dangerous. Like, these ones are good. These look like kind of classic bullet hell projectiles, and that means that if I squint at the screen now, they're standing out quite a lot because they're very bold. But I would kind of just rethink the entire color language of the game and be a lot more strict about where I use red. We can use Death Blossom now. See, that maybe deserves to be red, because that's something I could forget that I can use. But I've seen other places in the game where it's just like, why is that color? What is your opinion on people vibe coding and making games? You can make things however you want to, but it's not something I'm personally particularly interested in. You know, I think the way I would look at it is, if you make a cool game and it's vibe coded, I'm not going to know the difference, right? I'm not going to have any opinion on that. You see this all the time on Reddit. People are like, oh, why do you care about whether the art is AI generated and not the code? Well, it's like, I'm interacting with the art. I can see the art. I can see if it sucks. The code only sucks if it doesn't produce a fun experience when you play with it. The problem is, if you make a bunch of code, or you request a bunch of code, and you don't understand how it works, then it's going to make it harder for you to, be able to modify it, right? And the thing about games is they get better through iteration. So the thing that usually determines how good a game is when it releases is, how many times have we iterated through every part of the design and improved it in some way? And sometimes you iterate through the whole game and you realize, oh, actually, it's not that type of game, it's this type of game, make some big changes, right? And if you vibe code and you don't understand the code you're putting into your game, it's going to make it harder for you to iterate on it later on. So for your own process, that's kind of that's the main interaction you need to understand about the link between design and programming, right? Because in a big game studio, they're done by different people, right? My background as a designer, I didn't write code. I went home, I made my own games, and I coded those. But when I was at work, I wasn't being paid to code. I was being paid to plan, test, theorize, and someone else did the programming. But the link in your own projects between how you code and how you design is the speed of iteration. And this kind of ties back to the make small games thing we were talking about earlier. You make a smaller game with fewer parts, it means that if you work on that game for 6 months or 3 years before you launch it, however long however long you spend on it, that time is going to be divided up by how many parts, how many things in the game exist, right? So if you make a game with 10 levels and 3 systems, then your time spent on the game is going to be divided by that amount of things. If you make a game with 8 systems and 30 levels, you're dividing your time up by more things, and that means that you don't get to iterate through everything as many times, and that means that everything will be to a lower quality. And that is why people fail at making indie games when they come into indie with the expectation of just making something based on a AAA game that they like, because they don't have a sense of what a small scope, minimalist, good game looks like, because they don't play indie games, right? So they kind of go into it with this expectation that my game must have an inventory system and crafting and a story and New Game Plus and all of these things, and then every part of their game ends up being shoddy and none of it is particularly good. It's much better to make a game with fewer things in, where there are very clear standout parts that are very good. People will buy that because there will be a type of person that really likes that thing, and they don't. These things are all. If you vibe code and you don't understand, it's very different vibe coding if you know the programming language and you're just kind of using it to speed it up, and then you read through it and go, oh yeah, that works, and you put it in. But if you don't understand what you're putting in your game, you end up with the same problem as someone that makes a game that's too ambitious for them, right? It's kind of the same fundamental issue of like, you're trying to make something that you don't have the skills to make. And what that means is, even if you kind of manage to fake it and make something that looks like what you tried to make, you're not going to be able to make it better, because the quality of a game doesn't come out of the initial idea. It comes out of like how many times you go back through the idea and tweak and change things to make them what they actually should be, right? Because game design is a second order problem. You don't design a good game by having a good idea and then making exactly what was in your head. You make a good game by having an idea, executing it as well as you can very quickly, playing it, and then from playing it, finding out what's wrong with the idea and then modifying the idea iteratively over and over again. It's why game studios use like an agile way of working, where you make something and then you remake it over and over again and you iterate and you test. If you can't do that because you don't understand the code you're putting in your game, then you're never going to make a good game. You might make a project that you impress yourself with because you go, oh, this is more than I thought I could do. But if you aren't able to refactor your own code or go back through the game and fundamentally change mechanics because they don't work and they don't produce the kind of experience you wanted them to, then you can't really do game design, because you're sort of like not really in control of the code in your game. Yeah. And Nosby, that makes sense to me as well. If the stream was completely balked, then I'll upload the recording instead of the VOD afterwards. Haven't been doing this for long and are finding programming difficult. But often, that when people can't program or they think they can't program, there are a few underlying issues with that. And they're not ones that people like to talk about because they can sound incredibly cruel when you first hear someone say them. One of them is that you have to read the manual, right? Learning to program, even if you've been programming for 5 or 10 years and you want to do a new thing in your game engine or in your programming language, you need to read the manual. You need to be able to read forum posts and stuff like that. And that means that lots of people who've tried to learn to program and can't have some underlying issue with either attention or literacy, and they think the issue is that programming is hard, right? Because they've tried it for a little bit, And they've tried to learn it in the way that they prefer to learn, which is by watching a video and have someone explain it to them, because that's how they prefer to learn. And the actual issue is that you can't learn programming, or you can't learn most parts of programming from someone explaining it to you in a video. What you need to do is kind of get into the engine, try and solve your own problems, and then read the manual to understand how the syntax of that language works. Yeah, exactly, RTFM. And a lot of the time you get people say, oh, I've tried and it's too hard. I need to vibe code, or I need to follow a video tutorial. And the underlying issue is that certain types of logical math or something like that. Yeah. And like, I'm not an expert on any of these things. So like, you know, for example, Altasia in the chat, you just pointed out the difference between programming and coding. Like, I'm not a computer scientist. I don't come from a background of formally learning how to program. I'm just someone that likes games, enjoys being able to make them. And I, you know, over the years, I've jumped between tools. I spent a lot of time not programming at all, just like making, you know, levels in level editors for games. Because the thing that I enjoyed was the making games part, not necessarily, oh, I'm a coder and I want to apply that to, you know, something that people find fun and are going to buy. I just wanted to make games. So I'm not, you know, I will be the first person to tell you I'm not a person to teach about that stuff. But I have done 4 or 5 years of teaching a sort of intro games programming course. And the thing that I often found was people assume that if they can't do it, it's because there's other people that are naturally talented at it, rather than it being a kind of discipline about how you teach yourself. You know, and like even just understanding that even senior programmers are constantly researching things or looking things up in the manual, that can be quite a helpful realization to have quite early on, is that, you know, people aren't good at programming because they've internalized the entire language and they know it off by heart. That can be helpful. It speeds you up. It's something that's a thing you develop over time. And one thing that's always helpful to do after you've been learning something for a year or so is to look back and think, okay, how long would this thing that I'm trying to do now have taken me 6 months ago? Because one of the things I find I'm constantly doing is that when I'm working on a game, I think of a new feature and I think, oh, that will be too much work. And I'm actually basing my time estimation on who I used to be rather than who I am now. So I think something's going to be really difficult, and then I'll start doing it, and it was way easier. And part of that is because we have spent way longer. If you think of who you were 2 years ago or 5 years ago in terms of your skills, you have spent way longer having that lower ability than you have with your current ability. So we tend to underestimate ourselves and we think, oh, I can't do that thing. And it's like, well, that's because you're basing your idea of who you are based on who you were a year ago or based on who you were 5 years ago. So a really helpful thing when you're learning something technical, it can feel like the progress is really slow, but it can be very helpful to occasionally go, okay, where was I at 6 months ago? How long would it have taken me to do this thing that I'm doing now 6 months ago? It's the same with art. Like, I'm having the same thing at the moment with like drawing sprites for my game, drawing animations and stuff. It gets so much faster, and I forget that I just don't see the progress that I made because I'm so focused on the kind of current moment, and you don't realize how much better you're getting at the thing. Okay, this one's good. This is, I think this is like a better one in terms of tapping into the main things people expect to get from one of these games. I like Astrolite. I give it 4 stars. It does what people want from this type of game, I think. Let's check out the last one. So this one isn't a bullet heaven game per se. It has kind of some similar qualities. We're going to be doing a kind of lane defense with stuff coming in from either side. And then we've got our cute little witch, and we're casting spells and stuff. So let's see how this works. We're doing recipes, so there might be a little bit of a memory game element there. Yeah, I don't mind having the vibe. You know, I don't mind having the vibe coding chat because most of the time when Gen AI comes up, it's about art. And I think what we're talking about today is a slightly different thing, which is about learning processes. And, you know, the end result of what you make doesn't look any different if you vibe coded. It's a case of like, does it make you better at doing the thing? I've got to go and do a talk next week at a local kind of community college or like secondary. It's kind of like senior high in the UK, but it's elective. There's a level of education between like 16 and 19 where you don't really have to be at school anymore. So we have this kind of senior high level that's kind of like a technical college. I'm going and doing a talk at one of those next week. And one of the things I'm really going to emphasize is that, you know, there is no place in the creative industries, which I think of games more as being part of the creative industries than software. We have a lot of kind of software dev practices because we have programmers, but what we're doing is fundamentally making entertainment for people. I think of us as the creative industries, and the thing I'm going to be going on and on at them about for 45 minutes is that there is no place in the creative industries for people who do not love what they do. And when you meet, this is one of the reasons why ideas guys are so annoying in games, and why if you go into Reddit and go, why does everyone hate ideas guy? I just have these amazing ideas. Is that the only valid way to express a desire to do something is to do it, you know? There's no point saying, I want to make games. It's a meaningless statement because, you know, as the TikTok girlies as the kind of dating girlies on TikTok will tell you, if he wanted to, he would, right? It's the same thing. If you wanted to, you would. If you really want to do something, you're going to do it. If you don't do it, there might be something holding you back, right? But in that case, your task is to find out what it is. And I think, like, I don't want to stay on the AI thing for too long, but vibe coding is a good example of misdiagnosing the problem, right? Like, you want to make games and you can't code, so rather than diagnosing the problem by working out why you struggle to learn to code, you get someone else or something else to do it, right? And the underlying problem might be that learning to code requires you to read the manual, and you don't have a very good attention span, and you don't like reading the manual. And it's like you're putting the problem in the wrong place, and that's going to like have a longer term effect on you. And really, if you really wanted to be able to do that thing, you would be up for learning it the hard way, because you would feel so compelled to do the thing. Like I'm not someone that came from a background of like doing a computer science degree and then going, hey, I'm a programmer, I'm good at programming, maybe I'll make a game. I sort of learned how to do some of the technical stuff, and I still don't understand most of it, but I wanted to make games so badly that I had to learn how to do that. And it's the same with art. Like you know, there are lots of people making games that are in denial about the fact that it's a visual medium. And they sort of like, well, that's all I can do, so that's how my game looks. And it's kind of like, well, you have to accept that if you want to make a video game, people are going to look at it, and that's going to be part of the thing that they either enjoy or hate about your game. And if you want to make games, you have to sort of make peace with the fact that there is a visual element, there is a technical element, and if you insist on making games on your own and doing it all yourself, then you need to learn how to do those things. And I think the danger of shortcuts is that you never really identify the underlying problem with why you find it hard to learn or practice that thing. Choose your mixture. So is this going to be like a attack that we start off with? I like the idea of a little cloud chasing things around. Press QWE to put in the ingredients. Oh, I missed the second thing. Oh, okay. Hang on. What was I... So, blue, blue, red. Okay, that's what we're doing here. Cancel. Blue, blue, red. That's neat. Okay, so we have our little spell book. There's a little bit of a memory game thing going on here where we have to remember the way to make each spell. It's being a bit slow, so I'm going to download the app and run it locally instead. Because it's having a little brain fart after I cast each spell. Let me just close that and open it again properly. Yeah, I like this already. I mean, the art is very appealing, obviously, but there's something about the concept of it. I don't always like having to remember things as a game mechanic, but I think if you make it the main thing, then fine, you know. Space to mix, art to redo. Okay, so we go dirt, 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 space. And the different spells have like different kind of attack patterns. What was that last instruction? So I missed the last instruction. R to read. Oh. Do we need to buy the ingredients? Is there a... Okay, so these characters have... We're gonna get some like... these guys attacking for us later on or something? Jump with left mouse button. Okay. Huh. This guy can attack. That's so nice. I really like that. They're gonna get to the... I don't like the controls currently, but it is... we had this conversation the other day with Knights of Nil, where, you know, if you're making an unusual game that has very unique concepts in terms of how the player interacts with the game, you're just going to probably have to go through more iterations of designing the controls, because you don't have anything to base it on. You know, if your game is a copy of something, or like mostly a copy of something, you just go, okay, my game is like Hades, how does Hades do this? And you just copy it, because that's what players will be used to. This is an unusual a set of things. We have the kind of Angry Birds catapult aiming. I have to keep my other hand on QWE to do the mixing. Maybe I'll get used to it as we go, but let's see. Let's go. We've got Elixir of Breeze. Let's do the fire. I guess we've got some... Yeah, I'm running out of resources, and then I'm not really sure what I should have done to make sure I didn't run out of them, if that makes sense. I kind of want to play it with the controller, and I don't think it has controller support yet. But as soon as I see this kind of SNES-looking pixel art, I sort of expect it to be a controller-based game. And it would be interesting to see what the UX would be with a controller. Yeah, we're dying. Okay. So the thing that I need to learn as a player, and I'm reasonably on board with how this game looks and feels, so that makes the failure okay, because that makes me want to learn how to do it properly, right? You can make your game quite harsh and make people fail very quickly, but whether or not they want to pick it up again and learn how to do it right and learn where they went wrong is going to depend on how appealing your game is. One thing I noticed, I'll talk about it in a minute when it comes back up again. Let's go restart. One thing I would, very small thing, but the text is kind of growing and shrinking with the card. That makes it a little bit, because you kind of start reading it and then you move the mouse onto it and then it all moves. Tincture of Echoes, that's cool. I'm going to go with that because that uses one of everything. So that feels like we can probably cast that more times. Knock back enemies, damage reduced with each hit while destroying all projectiles in the area. So that's like a... Does that actually damage them though? File of Thorn. One thing about the way that this is laid out is that the order of these isn't always in the right order for the UI. So you see here, this goes red, red, blue, and this goes blue, blue, red. And when I'm reading that and trying to learn the spell, I've got my fingers over QWE, which corresponds to red, blue, and green. But the order of this is not correct, because the red needs to always be on the same side of the blue that maps onto the buttons I have to press in the game. So Dev, if you're watching this, that's like a really important thing to fix. I would make sure you get that fixed, because the order of these, so this I can't remember the order in the game because I haven't played it long enough. Green, blue, red, if this is right, that should actually be QWE, but it might not be in the right order. Some of these are definitely not in a consistent order because it goes red, blue here and blue, red here. And that might seem like a tiny thing, but it's going to be very, very... make the game really hard to learn. That's the thorn, okay. Does it just happen in a random place? I didn't really read the... I think we might be suffering from pick 4 a little bit here as well. You know... Let's upgrade the thorn so I don't have too much else to learn. We want, like, the basic version of the, of the game where I don't have to learn as many recipes, so I'm just going to keep upgrading the same one to start off with. These are very cute goblins. Yeah, I think you're right there, Nahid. I mean, I'm fine at reading them as like an order of like left, mid, right. That's fine. But they should definitely always be consistently in the right order. The other thing is backspace or delete should be the shortcut for getting rid of them. Just really intuitive. I went to do it then, even though it's not actually the input. The game hasn't told me that's the input, but it just felt right to be able to go slam, slam, slam and get rid of them. Because I'm typing something in, right? I'm typing a sequence of things that go in like I'm typing out a word. So let me use backspace for that. This is blue, blue, green. Again, that was shown as the green was on the... Oh, I can't remember now. Let's have a look. Blue, blue, green. Yeah, the green is on the right there, and it's oriented on the left here. There's a really nice thing about the kind of casting spells and also launching your buddy. It kind of creates this nice sort of... It's like a kind of patting your head while rubbing your belly type challenge. And that can be bad if it's, you know, things don't match up in an annoying way because the game is testing you on the wrong skills, but it feels like trying to do these two things at once is kind of like the juice the secret sauce of this game. But sometimes you're focusing on casting a spell, and sometimes you need to tell your little tiefling friend where to jump up in the air. Like that. I thought he was going to beat that guy up. There's a little bit of resource management here of like, oh, I haven't picked anything that uses the red ingredient, and that means that I just end up with a surplus that I can't use, and then I get situations like this. I think if that becomes a recurrent problem, then the way that I would approach it is to go down to 3 choices instead of 4, because again, I'm not sure why we have 4 choices. Maybe it was initially set up with 3, and there's a really good design reason why there's 4. But the design reason should never be, I'm going to give people an extra choice because people usually have 3 and I want to be more generous, right? Because the constraints that exist in a genre are usually there for a reason. They've usually developed for a reason. It's kind of like hand sizes in a card game, or, you know, not going to go into depth on this, talked about it. If you want to hear me talk about this, like, just search deck builder on the channel, but there's a reason why we discard our hand in a deck builder. If you change that rule, you need to understand what it was doing. I don't know if having more choice here is a good idea. Just makes this moment of choosing take longer. It seems like what I really need to do is make sure that my first 2 spells include all of the colors. Otherwise, I end up stuck with a surplus of something. So, homing bolts, red, red, blue. Yeah, this should just have the key that's mapped to it in the corner. Because these even look like a keyboard key. We've got red, red, blue. We need something that uses green. Maximum ingredient capacity increased. Oh, they got to 15 now. Okay, so we've got some nice chunky upgrade stuff going on. That's quite a considerable difference, like increasing the top amount by 5, like a third of what it was. This is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying make your first couple of upgrades really feel really meaningful. Because, yeah, like someone just said in the chat, what makes someone want to play a roguelike over and over again? Well, it's like how quickly run 2 deviates from run 1, you know? Or how quickly run 101 feels different from run 100. So then you have to think about the design of your sessions, and like, when someone gets to pick a choice early on, you know, how big is the set of things that they can choose from, and how much of a change do they make to the gameplay? And if all of your choices are just change this number by 2%, then it's not going to feel different. I feel like we could have a shortcut to this along here. You could have the icons, I guess that you don't, everything here is kind of pixel perfect, so you probably don't want to shrink the icons. But it does feel like we could have, there's space here to have like 5 or 6 recipes for things you've learned so far without having to pause them. Sorry if the stream is being temperamental for people. Although it seems like we're not getting... What I'll do is I'll take the full VOD down and put an edited version up if it's been cutting in and out. Another great thing about Streamlabs, there's just no information for me about what is happening with the stream, apart from I can see the chat and I can see whether people are saying that the stream's not working, but there's not a... There's not a thing to me that indicates like a ping or anything like that. Okay, green, green, blue. Oh, yeah, okay. Green, green, blue. Lifts a fortified barrier that pushes all enemies away from Cauldron while blocking incoming attacks. See, like, the game isn't structured in such a way that it makes any sense to pick something purely defensive at the start, because I need to be able to deal damage. But I'm going to try it. But I can do that, but now I can't zap anything. So it feels like you can basically gimp your build by starting off with a defensive spell. Okay, they do get bashed. They take a little bit of damage. I think maybe a thing to think about adding here would be like the ability to just throw one of an ingredient in the pot to get like a very small damage thing. You know, like you can just put one green thing in the pot and maybe you put one green thing in the pot and just trigger it and you get a little bit of health. You put one red thing in the pot and trigger it and you do a tiny little fireball. You put one blue thing in the pot and trigger it and you get some sort of defensive boost. Because there are a lot of points where you can just feel like you've misbuilt the first couple of choices. Yeah, I'm not sure I like having to remember the spells. There's so much space here where we could put reminders. Cool. Well, sorry about the interruptions to the stream. I will probably put an edited version up so that people can listen with only 5 minutes about vibe coding instead of 20 minutes of it. And then if you did that thing where you can use one of an ingredient to get a small effect, you would probably balance it so that that's kind of usually a little bit wasteful. You know? So if a spell costs 3 ingredients, that's like 100% effectiveness, and then the things that cost 1 ingredient are like 15% effectiveness. You know, that kind of balancing so that it usually doesn't pay to use the smaller things. You don't want to encourage it too much, but yeah, it feels like some of the early choices you can maybe end up with a not very good build. Although I'm doing better now. I picked 2 things that were purely defensive that don't do much damage, and I seem to be doing better than when I had the offensive stuff. I guess it is a defense game, so... Oh, special burb. Special burb. Spike. I feel like the mental load of having to remember more spells is making me lean more towards the passives. So that upgrades damage for that shockwave effect uses one of each. So the passive I got just upgraded that quite a bit. I can kind of spam that now. Yeah, the memory game thing is an interesting question because when it comes to sort of accessibility stuff in games, like with color, for example, like I think color blindness is an interesting example because it's like you should in theory be able to make a game that is about judgment of color, right? And that will just fundamentally not be accessible to people who can't see color the same as how other people see it. But most of the time, that's not the actual skill that you're trying to test in your game. So you want your game to work for colorblind people because it's not a game about how well can you identify colors. There are games like that. There's a board game called Pantone that's like about like identifying very specific shades of a color, right? And I think memory is a similar thing where it's like, is this meant to be a memory game? Is that one of the skills that we're trying to test? And if so, is that fun for people? Because I don't feel like having remembered these two spells that I'm doing and no longer having to go into the book and look at them, that's not really making me feel like any satisfaction compared to just having them in the corner and like knowing I can use them. Okay, I've mastered these two spells. I'm using these all the time. I've been forgetting to use these, which, like someone in the chat just said, the memory game thing sort of discourages you from using the new spells. So I with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I still feel like there's enough space on the interface to just have them there, or even shift everything over and have a sidebar that just has all your recipes in. And I know at that point it's a very different game that I'm talking about, but it's almost like, oh, you're playing Helldivers and you've got to do one of those little direction arrow QuickTime events on a computer, but you have to remember what it was. That's like, And I end up kind of spamming random stuff because I can't remember how to do it. Green, green, red. Blue, blue, green. Green, green, red, and blue, blue, green. So that is green, green, red, and blue, blue. Okay. Try and get this speedy burb. I really like the interaction between the spell casting and like managing your little jumping pal. That's really cute. It's a nice use of the theme as well. Like the fact that it's kind of two characters hanging out who are friends and they both have different skills and stuff. That's like a nice mechanical link to the appeal of these characters. But yeah, I'm not really getting much out of the having to memorize stuff or keep opening the spellbook aspect of the game. Just feels more frustrating than anything. And I think what it would lead to, if I was playing this more seriously, I would just pick 3 spells and then pick the passives for every other upgrade. I like this. I think the comparison to fighting game combos is interesting, but I think there are certain things that you're more willing to do in a multiplayer game because your mastery is your kind of expression of mastery is towards another person. You know, like there's stuff that I will happily do in a MOBA that in a single player game I would be like, why do I care about this? You know? And I think the kind of remembering combos is a little bit like that. I'm going to give it one more go. And this time I'm going to play it in what I would think is the optimized way, which is to not have too many spells. I'm going to cap myself out at 3 spells and then just keep upgrading those spells and picking the passive upgrades. So red, red, green for this fiery thing. It's a hard one to judge because the version of this game that, you know, has a side panel with all of the spells on or something is a fundamentally different game. It's just whether or not the skill that is being tested through the memory game aspect adds something that people are really going to enjoy. Okay, that's a close-up defense thing, okay. So I need to make sure my next ability is like a long-range thing. What I like about this is because all of the abilities are so different in terms of how they respond to the battlefield. It does really make you feel like you're making kind of interesting decisions, and it ties into the idea of being someone at their cauldron, like experimenting with magic. Right, we've got a red, red, green. So let's do the blue, 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 because then we can spam between those two. Red, red, green, and blue, blue, blue. And this will be our close-up one, the red, red, green, and the blue, blue, blue will be for long distance, so... Like, it makes you feel like you're trying to be clever with your spell choices, which is quite a nice way of using the theme of magic. There's a lot of fantasy games that kind of use fantasy story tropes about, oh, here's the wizard, and here's the fighter, and here's the rogue or whatever, here's the ranger. And they don't really get you into that kind of space of feeling like being a wizard is about being clever and experimenting with things, which this is doing very, very well. It's a really good matchup of the theme with the genre. I need to remember not to do my fire spell when stuff is not near the camp. A little rat trying to eat my cauldron. And now it's forcing me to have another spell. I'm just not going to use that one. What was it? Red, red, blue. Oh, that's that. Increases the damage of a mixture for each ash ingredient contained. So that I have a spell that uses 2 of the red ashes, I think. Red, red, red. Yeah, red, red, green, and red, red, blue. So that's a good upgrade because both of my... These both use that ingredient. I'm going to miss the speedy bird. Starting to feel like the memorizing stuff is enjoyable now. Didn't have a great first reaction to it. But I think maybe just slowing down the rate at which new players can get new spells would help with that problem a little bit. Ah. As someone with ADHD playing any game with a memory element, I'm just kind of like, do I really not remember it, or did the information just never go into my head in the first place because I wasn't paying attention? That's the conundrum when it comes to memory with ADHD stuff. The hardest thing about like relationships and friendships with ADHD people as well. Like, I don't remember that. It's like, do you not remember it, or were you just not listening when I told you? That's definitely something I've experienced from both ends, from both sides. Okay, that's the one I need to remember that I've got. Yeah, this is a really cute game. I'm very impressed with this. I think I'm being won over to the... I'm okay with it being a memory game after a couple of plays. And I think part of it is that it's appealing enough for me to be willing to try and get over that initial barrier of like not liking the memory game thing. But I think one of the things you can do to try and cook the books a little bit so that players don't have that initial problem is just... If I'm gonna, you know, you don't have to do this all the way through the game. It could just be for the first few levels. Reduce it to 3 choices. Have one of them always be a passive. And one of these is always an upgrade of one of the things you already have. And maybe there is some of that stuff. I don't know how random this is. But to come back to Vampire Survivors cooks the book. So the more you select something, the more of it shows up. And you can banish stuff as well. I think we saw... was it in this, or... is there a banish mechanic in this? I haven't seen it, but I think if you weighed it so that there was only a chance to get one new spell every time that this rolls, and it's like you're rolling from the 3 categories: passive thing, new spell, upgrade an existing spell. You wouldn't have to do that all the way through the game, but you could maybe do it for the first like 5 upgrades, and that would help to keep people on rails so that they don't break the game for themselves. Because my experience with the first or the second run of like getting too many new spells too quickly made the memory game part of the game overwhelming, and I think that's going to throw people off. And some people who might find this game fun will bounce off it earlier than they should, which would be a shame because it's really, really nice. It's really charming and it's very fun. I mean, I'm not talking as much, and that's because I'm having to concentrate very much because we're doing the memory game thing to cast the spells, and then we're also trying to launch our friend up in the air to catch the gold. I really, really like the way we've got these are cute characters. They're very appealing. The kind of theme of them doing very different things from each other fits the mechanics really nicely. And now, because I'm so bought into this and I like the thing that the two characters do, this is like a game where I would be happy for there to be a story after a level, right? Whereas the first game we played on this stream, I just couldn't see how the story justified itself existing in the game. So none of those are upgrades of a spell we've already got, so I'm just going to go for the Mystic Spices. Getting attacked by an ent now. Big tree boy coming. Also, the way these two kind of mini games relate to each other is very similar to what we were talking about earlier about like the two heat maps in Vampire Survivors. Like the risk is down here, the reward is up here, and one thing is distracting you from the other. And that's kind of what makes the game go. Isn't just this and it isn't just this, it's the way that they kind of push and pull your attention to like different parts. And it's very clearly visually here where it's like this game is up here and this game is down here, and you have to do both because you have to do the thing at the top to progress and you have to do the thing at the bottom to not die. I'll go for the upgrade. Don't want a new spell. I don't feel totally sure when these are filling back up either. Yeah, I think Sean, it is kind of funny that they're just attacking the cauldron. It feels odd, but the reason this kind of like distraction minigame of having the top bit works as well is because it's quite low stakes. You feel annoyed when you miss one of the more valuable birds that's faster, but it doesn't totally mess you up, you know, because there's plenty of them going by. Yeah, I would definitely try a version of the game where you can see you don't have to memorize the ingredients. Although having played it a little bit, I'm a little bit more on board with having to memorize stuff now. I don't mind it so much as my initial reaction to it, but it's also, you know, the game's brought a lot of goodwill with me by just looking so nice. Which kind of makes me feel more motivated to try and be good at it. Starting to get some faster enemies now as well. Yeah, I think just maybe smoothing the upgrades that you get at the start so that new players are discouraged from picking too many new spells. Because that's not a fun thing to learn through experience. You know, like getting so many spells that you're overwhelmed because you picked 5 new spells straight away. It's not like a fun learning experience where something slapstick happens that makes you laugh, you know? You want people to learn from failing, it usually needs to be like a failure that feels fun when it happens. And getting overwhelmed because you pick too many spells and then feeling stupid and losing the game isn't a kind of... It doesn't feel like a fun failure. Yeah, the pop when you make a spell is lovely. Ah! Wanted to get the special burb! It forced me to get a new spell. It forced me. Excuse me. Excuse me, ghost. Stack lots of fiery things because they're all getting a bit too close for my liking. So the game at the top is kind of upgrading in terms of the variety of birds. But you'll notice it's not like a grind where it's just increasingly more difficult to get the basic thing. It's throwing in stuff that's like got a bigger opportunity cost to it. Because we've got those fast kind of phoenixes coming by now, and I bet if I manage to get one of them, I'm going to get a load of reward in one go. So it's giving me like... It's keeping the original stuff in place in terms of the basic birds that I can hit to get rewards. But it's adding this kind of slightly higher skill ceiling. Moving the top of the skill ceiling, but not moving the bottom of it, I guess. And still just kind of plug away at getting the basic ones. There we go. Got one of the special burbs that time. What's the new spell? Jar of Droplet. Blue, blue, green. Bouncing. Oh, they're fun. I like those. They're nice little speedy attack. Uh-oh. I got carried away! Yeah, I got 2 of the fast birds in the same hit. Yeah, I think there's a cool lesson here. If you're making action games, I'm sort of... You can get a lot of mileage out of just giving people... Like, you know, there's a everything that I need to respond to on the screen here is quite a simple thing on its own. But when you put them all together and you kind of increase the difficulty of your game, not just by like having stuff with more health, but by having more information to process in terms of like, there's a fast thing down there and there's a thing over there that's like a high reward, and like you add more and more of this stuff And each of the individual things is very, very simple, but the situation that the player needs to respond to is becoming more complex. You get so much out of that in terms of like how it feels to engage and play with it. And that's kind of, I guess any game has that to it to a certain degree, but I think that's kind of how you make an action game that feels deep a lot of the time. Not necessarily about making the thing that the player has to do any more complex. It's changing the situation around it to be more complex. So that the skill that the player is... Okay, it's like I've got better at memorizing the spells now, right? So I'm better at doing the thing that I'm doing with my hands. But what am I doing? How is the game changing in terms of what I need to do with my brain? Okay, it's giving me more things to process and more opportunities to spot and more types of, like... You know, these threats are complicated, but I can see that one of these guys is faster, so maybe I need to respond to that differently. Summon a cat? Is that an active spell? No, it's a passive. It's gonna be a little cat turret, I think. That's a good tactic when you're getting swamped, just keep casting that. It feels faster to cast the 1, 2, 3 spell of like the 3 different symbols than the other ones. It's an interesting little quirk of the controls of this game. There's the puss cat. Not very clear cat. It's a little bit too dark. I'm going to keep upgrading that. Incoming intruder! Preparing to battle? Who's this? Excuse me. Uh-oh. It's a brat. My nemesis. I don't think launching my dude is doing anything. Look at these guys. I love these. These shadow demons are great. Oh yeah, no, it does do damage to her. Okay. It's a good boss battle. Was still using the same kind of skill expression that you use in the main game, but just like a little bit of an adaptation to it. Just what you want in a boss. Choose your demon art. When Mallow gathers ingredients, he collects 2 times the amount. When the mixture hits an enemy, 10% chance Mallow will create an area that applies burn and slows for a short duration. Or Mallow is the name of the tiefling. Yeah, I do need a quicker way to undo the spell, like delete the spell. Big slime. It was a great slime. What's inside it? Like a... Oh, it's a king slime, and it's eaten the king. It's got a crown inside it. I'm gonna have to stop this in a minute because we've overrun, but this is great, and I think it's maybe not coming across in watching me play it, but I feel very compelled to. I feel like I want to get better at this game, and that's a very hard thing to do, and it's obviously what you want out of a skill-based game. You want players to feel that way, and I'm not sure how you achieve that really, but I do feel it very strongly here. And like the first two games, like I said, I think with a Bullet Heaven game, it's not so much about skill. It's a little bit of judgment, and it's a little bit the satisfaction of like farming a resource and investing it. And the first game in particular felt like it went towards skill in a way that didn't go all the way. So sort of like halfway house between being a skill-based twin stick shooter game and a game about farming and upgrading. This is very skill-based because it's a different genre of game for a start, but I feel very strongly like I want to carry on playing it and get better at it. And that's interesting. And I think if you go back to like my original comments about the memory game aspect of it, like that wasn't necessarily a game design thing of like, it's always bad to have to use memory as a skill and make the player have to remember something. But I have a strong personal aversion to those kind of things because I'm bad at remembering things. And I think there's something here about, you know, if you read any book on game design, there'll be stuff in there about people find different things fun, right? People find different things fun, and you could call it neurodiversity, really. I know that's not how we normally use that term. We usually use it in the context of like educational differences, but finding different things fun because of how your brain works is an example of neurodiversity. And there's something interesting there where my initial aversion to being tested on a particular skill, as I got onboarded into the game, turned into something that was very satisfying to start to conquer. You know? Like feeling like, oh, I don't like this aspect of the game because it's testing me at something I'm not good at. And then getting a little bit further in and going, oh no, I'm actually getting the hang of this. Right? There's something very satisfying about that. But your game, I think your game has to hook people in early enough for them to be able to get over that hump and like go, okay, this game is asking me to do something I'm not used to doing and I don't feel comfortable doing it, and it puts me off a little bit. And then because the game has like such nice art and sound design and all of those aspects, and they've done all of this stuff, like when the game is paused, the music drops down to just the bass line. That's a good example of that. Because the presentation is so nice, it kind of helps create a kind of flow state and immersion and everything. I overlook the thing that I don't initially like and then get to the point where I'm starting to master it, and it feels really, really satisfying because I've overcome something. And there's lots of decisions that have gone into making that work. It's not like an easy thing where we can just go, oh, this is what you should do if you want to achieve this. But I think the fact that I feel this so infrequently on a stream when I'm playing an action game, I think the last time I felt this was when anyone who saw Rewinded recently, which was like a third-person shooter where you had to assassinate someone and then assassinate yourself when there was time loopy stuff. I got a similar thing there where it just really had its hooks into me, and I wanted to carry on playing it for like 2 hours and get really, really good at it. And that probably sounds a little bit obvious, that if you're making a skill-based game, that's the thing you want people to feel. But it's interesting to me that there's like, it feels like there's a relationship between that initial aversion to being like, I don't like being tested on this skill, and then overcoming that slightly, and then the game feeling more sticky because of that, because I've kind of invested time in getting over this thing that's kind of a little bit difficult for me initially. We'll see a couple more of the new monsters, and then I shall have to log off. Hey, Onalera, I'm glad you're enjoying the podcast. We are doing a new episode tomorrow. It will be out in a few days. I am just finishing the last sort of 20 pages of the book. We're doing Finn and Sylvester's book, which is a very mixed one for me. I think it could be a very, very helpful book for certain types of people and very unhelpful for others. I'm glad people are finding that helpful. It's just a good example of if you want to make something that other people are gonna engage with. It sort of applies to games as well, games, but like with the content, you know. I started that podcast because, one, I wasn't reading as much as I would like to, and I felt bad about that. And then the other one was, I could see that there were loads of people who were making games who'd never read a book about it, or had read one book and then decided that all books about games were bad. And I was like, why is this? What can I do to rectify this? And I just thought, hey, I'll just read the books for people. So that's the thought behind that podcast. Probably the worst name for SEO, because when I was coming up with the name, I completely forgot that library means a different thing in terms of software development. But I'm glad people are listening and finding it useful. And learning Australian slang from Tom as well. That should be a feature. You just learn a new piece of Australian slang in every episode. I feel like the reference that you're the set of references that you're getting to by calling Tom old mate Tom is such, that's like a real kind of deep cut. Yeah, it does feel like the jumping fella should hurt them when he lands on them. He does on the boss. It's a little bit confusing that he kind of does damage sometimes and not others. Yeah, I would be tempted to make an upgrade that gives you a 4th choice. I think this is the way around the 3 versus 4 choice problem. You start people off with 3 choices, and then you make getting 4 choices into an upgrade. And then you don't overwhelm people with decisions at the beginning, and you reduce the chance that the new players are going to pick too many new spells and not be able to play the game and bounce off of it immediately.
Need to stop stream, but cannot stop playing.
Then they ain't getting near. We're just gonna keep casting that big old bubble. Gonna upgrade that one, seeing as we're getting so much value out of it. I had the same thing about less and fewer, Paul. I've always said less instead of fewer, and someone pointed it out to me recently, and now I'm sort of like hypersensitive to it. Only over the past couple of months. The resource management part of the game has sort of gone away now because I'm getting them so quickly that I don't have to think about how many I've got of each resource. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's just a thing to like build up to make the start of the game have some friction, and then later on it goes away, and then you have a feeling of kind of power and freedom. So I can feel like that isn't a bad thing. That doesn't necessarily mean that the game is misbalanced, because it means that every time I start the game, I'm going to be like, hey, I can't wait to get to the point where I don't have to think about these numbers anymore. Just kind of where I'm at with it now. Like, I don't have to think about how many I have of each thing. I didn't even know I had this one. I didn't know I had level 1 of this. Yeah, the sound design is really nice. It's very gentle. I think if this was going for like all-in like JRPG battle noises, it would become grating quite quickly. I think there's a lot of thought gone into like making these sound effects satisfying without modeling them too much on, oh, this is a fireball, so it must go, you know? I like the way those upgrades work as well, where it's like, oh, this is going to upgrade every spell that uses, what are they? It's like a crystal, a root, and an ash or something. Because it makes you think through your little library of spells that you've built on this run. I've literally only just learned this. You can do the spells in any order. The order doesn't matter. So that's why I was confused by the UX and the layouts at the start, because it's telling you in order. I can do the QWE one as EWQ and go left to right or right to left, and they both work. Didn't realize that. I think that's why I've been managing to accidentally cast some of the spells I didn't know about, because it's just the ratio of the three things. Now I feel cursed with knowledge. Because I think I was doing better at the game when I was kind of sticking to a very strict order of them. Now I know I can do them either way. It's like, oh, you can read backwards? Oh. I remember my wasted months trying to learn how to play Invoker. Oh goodness. I'm gonna have nightmares about magical orbs tonight now that you've mentioned the I word. Right, I'm gonna have to stop there. This game is so sticky. I haven't played anything that got me that bad for a while. Thank you for joining. 100 people sitting here watching me make an anime witch go like that for 45 minutes. That sounded lewder than it should have done. Thank you for joining. If this is your first time on the channel and you want to submit a game, every Thursday it's Indies Under the Knife. I play games which haven't been released yet. I know, like, all three of the games today looked pretty polished. I do play games that are a little bit earlier on, a little bit more prototypey sometimes. It really depends. I try and set themes for every week. Yeah, every Thursday. And then every other Wednesday we do the community playtest stream, which is just everyone who supports this game on Patreon or is a YouTube channel member. I do prefer Patreon because Google take more of my money. It's also easier to give people bonuses. So I'm gonna do a proper Patreon ad, like some kind of competent internet business person today, because I always forget to do that. Let me just shut this game down. That's my little theme tune for the Gap. If you want to know how to support this channel, you can support us on Patreon. And what do you get? What do you get for doing that? You get absolutely nothing. You get to feel good. Now, I do put bonus stuff on Patreon, so everyone who supports the channel gets access to our Discord. I pride myself on our Discord for being a very kind of game design and creative direction focused indie games community. And what I mean by that is there's a phrase you should look up called the Eternal September problem, which is when a certain thing gets so popular that it ends up just always being inundated with noobs, right? So if you go on Reddit, every post, and YouTube's like this as well, most stuff is made for new people because they are the largest audience. If you go to a public place where people can ask questions about developing games, all of the questions are about beginner stuff. They just outweigh us. And so I wanted to create both this channel and the Discord community as places for people who are actually already making games, whether you've been doing it for a couple of years or a couple of decades, a place where you can hang out where most of the other people are at the same level as you, whether they're commercially releasing games or it's just a hobby that they take very seriously. And because of that, it means that we have, I would say we're biased towards Godot developers. We've got more Godot developers than everyone else, but because it's not a technical learning community, we've got people that make games in Godot, we've got people that make games for web, we've got people that make games in Unreal Engine, and Game Maker and Unity and everything else. And because we're all over that initial tutorial hell learning hurdle, it means that the whole thing is much more geared towards game design, creative direction, how can I make my game good, rather than the kind of entry level, like how do I make a game exist in a first place. Nate is whistleblowing, and it just says all I do is point and make fun of us. Yeah, the ritual humiliation. Basically, there are a couple of tiers on the Discord, on the Patreon. The orange one isn't available. That's one-to-one mentoring. All the slots for that are taken up. The green one is the basic one. That gets you into the Discord. It also means you get, and whenever I do a longer video essay that's taken some time, taken some effort, it goes on here first. And you can watch it on there without any YouTube adverts. And you will get it earlier. If you go the next tier up, you get that. You get the Discord access, and this is the blue tier because I use the loot system because I'm a nerd. With the blue tier, you get the podcast notes from the Game Developers Library podcast, which means that if you don't have time to listen, you've basically got my Cliff's Notes on each book. So the things that I thought were interesting or useful from every book we cover on the Game Developers Library, you get them there. The top tier, the purple one, you get like the scripts when I write a video essay. You get excerpts from the book I've been working on. So I've been slowly working on a book about game design that is specifically aimed at the audience for this channel. It's going to be called Game Design for Indie Devs. If I get a publisher, they will probably make me change the name to something less helpful. Because like one of the bugbears I have with books about making games is they don't tell you on the cover who it's for, right? So, I really like Jesse Schell's Art of Game Design. Some people don't like it. They go, it's not practical enough. That's because it's about game design and not about coding. I like this book, but like a lot of books about design, it sort of assumes that the person reading it wants to become a designer in a larger team. There's quite a lot of game dev books like that, where it's like, a game designer is this person with this job role in a game studio, and there's like 30 people around them, and they go over to the programmer and they talk to them about this, and they go over to the artist and talk to them about this. And as a indie dev, whether you're a solo dev or even if you're in a small team of 2 or 3 people, you have to wear a lot more hats, and you kind of sit at the interaction of game design and all of those other things. So I'm trying to write the book that is for that type of person. And the unique selling point of my book is not just that it is game design specifically for indie devs, but it was also all of the examples and case studies in the book are from indie games. So I'm trying to write the first book about game design that doesn't mention Mario or chess once. And I know that that's a tall order. Game designers and game design theorists cannot get through a book without assuming that you play and understand chess. They cannot get through a book without talking about Mario or Doom. And I'm kind of joking because I think you should know about Mario and Doom, and they're good things to learn from. But I'm an evangelist for indie games. You know, I do this channel not because I'm an indie game developer, because I'm not really. I haven't published an indie game. I've made lots of hobby projects and I've done lots of work as a game designer. But this is a game design channel by a professional game designer that is about indie games and how they're made, because I love indie games, and I love indie games because it is a creative space where we get interesting games being made with unusual, risky decisions and like more creativity and stuff like that. And that's a slightly different ethos from what you get elsewhere on the online game dev community sometimes, because a lot of places it's just like, I want to make a game because I want to make some money, and it's fine, that's valid, but that should be the secondary or tertiary thing. I think we should make games because we think games are cool and we want to contribute to them in some way. I know that's a little bit wishy-washy, hippy-dippy for some of you, but that's the way I feel, and that is the kind of ethos behind this channel. So if you want to support it and you got like $3 or $4 a month that you usually spend on like anime body pillows, or like I don't know what you spend your money on, like anime body pillows, like disgusting cologne, you can spend it on me instead, and you will get the stuff here, and I will continue to keep trying to add new things there. Currently in the process, actually, I spoke to some of you earlier about doing a talk at a local college. I am getting us work experience students. So there's going to be some of you in the Discord. There's a little bit of admin on your side. Anyone who's from the Discord already who supports the Patreon or is a YouTube channel member, you might have seen about this on the Discord, but we're going to be getting some kind of interns effectively, because I found a game design college locally where they have to do a bunch of work experience, and they got in contact with me and they were like, can you give us a work experience brief? And I was like, well, I've only got one game. I can't give 50 students something to do in my game. But I do have a Discord full of game developers who might need help with their sound design or their marketing or making a trailer or extensive QA or maybe even doing localization, right? There are lots of students at this college where English is their second language, and they might be able to localize your game into Polish or something. And that's really cool, because where I live in the UK, there are basically no game studios, right? I live in Kent, which is a peninsula. It's the first place that was invaded by the Vikings, which is why everywhere where I live is called Dane this and has all of these Viking names. We're right stuck out on the edge of the country, and you have to go all the way to London, which is like 90 minutes on the train, to find a game studio. Well, there's one just before you get there in Medway. And that means that any students local to me who are doing games, and they either have to start their own company or they have to move away from their family to get any sort of work experience in games. So I don't know how it's going to work logistically, but those of you who are already part of the community, that's something that you will be able to be part of. And then obviously there will be some checks and balances. Any communication you have with the students might have to go through their teacher and stuff like that. But it will be really neat if we can give people experience working on a real indie game, doing helpful work that may actually help the developer and end up in the final game if it's something that's in the game rather than like playtesting or marketing. And in doing that, we could take a bunch of kids that, you know, the work experience that they might have got authored otherwise wouldn't really have anything to do with their course. So I'm very excited for that. I'm a little bit worried about the logistics of how it's going to work. But that's the sort of thing that just kind of emerges from having a community and thinking, oh, okay, these people want something. We've got this group of developers in the Discord community who support the channel. How can I make this benefit them so they get an additional bonus? Don't know how it's going to work. Everyone involved is going to be a little bit of a guinea pig, but if it works and it shows promise, it will be a thing we'll be able to do every year. And we'll have this like bank of students. It's not an exploitative internship. It's not like you're going and working a full-time job somewhere for months and not getting paid. That's how internships often work. This is like 20 hours of remote work. You know, if a student is really into sound design, they'll be able to pick jobs on like 5 different games and do little bits of sound design on loads of them, get loads of really cool portfolio experience. There might be another student that just likes one game and wants to like playtest it for 20 hours or organize playtests with other people. So we'll see how it happens, but I'm very excited about that. And I just wanted to like use the stream to announce it a little bit for those of you who are maybe already part of the community but not on there and haven't seen me talk about it. That's going to be another bonus of being part of that. So yeah, thank you all for joining, and have a good rest of the week and good luck on whatever you're working on, and see you later.